This morning, I want to title this message, The Secret Sauce of Generation Building. Secret Sauce of Generation Building. I really love this song. It's very short. It's not long at all. And sometimes you don't need a lot of words to say a whole lot. What I love most about this song is that I learned it not through a seminary class, not through a sermon, but through the hard circumstances of life. I think those are the best Bible passages that we have when we get to learn things in moments in our lives when we're just really not know where to turn, and then all of a sudden, God gives you some scriptures that kind of steady you, that kind of put you at ease. And so let me take you to that time in my life. I had been married only a year. You guys know this part of the story, but we lost our first baby a little over a year after being married. And that was hard in and of itself. But the following year, we were pregnant again and looking forward to bringing Matea into the world. And we had left Alabama and we had moved to California, and I was trying to be proactive, as a young husband, trying to think ahead, not allow life to just happen and not have any answers. So when we left our job here, they gave us something called COBRA insurance. And if you have transitioned from jobs, you may have heard the term COBRA. But essentially what it means is that you can leave the job and go somewhere else, and they'll give you insurance for a certain period of time before they cut it off, as you try to find your feet and find your footing in your new location. So at that time, which I'm sure is very different now, but that was 2007, COBRA insurance lasted, I want to say, about 16 to 18 months. And the way I figured it out was that this insurance was going to run out right before Matea was born. I also recognized that we had a C-section for the first birth, and we were going to have to continue to have C-sections, and I saw the bill for how much a C-section costs, even with losing the first baby, and it was some upwards of $20-something thousand. And I was like, no way we're going to be able to survive that without some insurance. So as I was thinking through that, I started to look around California. I don't know much about California, and I'm trying to figure out what is a good job that will allow somebody like me to be able to go to school in seminary and provide insurance for my family so that when this insurance run out, we can have this baby and not go into medical debt. And there were only a couple of places, and UPS was one of them. And so I said, I'm going to get a job at UPS. I'm going to make sure that my family is taken care of, that everything is going to work out. So I go to UPS and fill out the application, and I get the job. But then they tell you, when you in orientation, this is a very difficult job. And then they say you might not make it. And I'm looking around like, man, I'm 27 years old at the time. Like, I'm not that far removed from playing college football. They say that just the physical demands of the job runs a lot of people off. And I was like, no, that's not possible. I can't even fathom not being able to make it through this job because of the physical nature of the work. So for 2.5 months, I'm working every day at this job. I'm slinging these boxes around, filling up these 18-wheeler trailers, having to do a box every 6 seconds, and they weren't lying. The physical demands were rough. Like, I can still remember not being able to fully open my hands because of all the boxes. Like, my fingers got stuck like this. My little biceps felt like they were gonna break just because of moving them boxes all day. And then I get just a week out from passing my probation period. Now, you don't know anything about California. They have unions for a lot of their jobs. And what that means is once you get in the union, you pretty much can't get fired for a whole lot of stuff. Like you got all these extra layer of protections. And I remember the guys, it was a lot of Hispanic guys in there working with me. And I remember them talking about, they would talk back to the boss and be like, Psh, I'm in the union. You what you gonna do to me? And I remember that. And I remember getting called into the office like a week before my 90-day trial period was over with. And I was going to be an official part of the union. And they say to me, Terrence, it seems like you're struggling to keep up with the requirements of the job. And basically what they were telling me was that as I'm scanning these boxes and I'm putting these boxes in the back of these 18-wheelers, sometimes I was putting boxes that should have went to Alabama, and I was sending them to Arizona. Or boxes that need to go to Minnesota, I was sending to Maryland. Now here I am in the back of this trailer with a whole college degree, computer science degree, and I'm working with guys who got GEDs or didn't graduate high school at all. And they get Employee of the Month. And I'm trying to figure out what is wrong with me. But then, as I had done in my life before, I said, you know what? It's just time to buckle down. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to get this right. And I go back to work, and I work hard, and I'm trying to do it, and I'm trying to do it right. And they only give you, I think, one error per 2,000 boxes. And I was only doing about one error per 1,500 boxes. And so they said, Terrence, we don't think you're going to work it out. So they say you got 2 weeks to straighten it out. Needless to say, I didn't make it. I couldn't get up to the 2,000 boxes without sending somebody's package to another place. UPS was losing money. And they didn't consider me worthy of continuing on to try to get it right with these packages. So I lost the job a week before I would have got that insurance. Now we're only 2 or 3 months out from when the baby is born. Now I got to drive home and tell my little wife of 1 year that I got fired for poor performance. And I have no idea how we are going to pay for the birth of this child, nor do I know how we're going to handle other doctor visits and everything else as it relates to insurance. So I drove home. I'm sitting in my car trying to get the courage and strength to walk in and tell Thais that I got fired. And I don't know why, or I do know why. I was reading the Bible in my car, sitting in the driveway, and I opened it up to this little song. And when I read the words of this song, I learned some very valuable lessons that I want to point out to us this morning. So let me read it for you. It says, unless the Lord builds the house, those who build labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is vain for you to rise early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives his beloved sleep. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gate. The first thing that God used this psalm to teach me is that when it comes to building the next generation, which I was firmly committed in trying to do, take care of a newborn baby that was about to enter in the world, hopefully lay a foundation for whatever God would do in our family after that. The first thing I want us to see as we try to build the next generation is we have to trust the Lord. Parenting is hard. Mentorship is hard. You and I have to develop not a cliche trust of God, but a real trust of God, where we firmly place ourselves at the foot of the cross and admit that we don't have all the answers. Admit that we don't necessarily know how to do everything. And when you look at this psalm, it tells us at the very beginning that it's a psalm of Solomon. It's a song of him. It's given to him in terms of something that he wrote to give. One commentator even says that this was a song that they would sing at the birth of newborn boys. That they would use these words to wash over the family as they set out on the journey to be responsible for a life. And I love that they attributed this to Solomon, because you see some of the flavor of the way he wrote Ecclesiastes. When you look at the first couple of verses, just look at what he says. He says, those who build it labor in vain. And then he says, at the end of that verse, he says, the watchman stays awake in vain. And then at the beginning of verse 2, he says, it is vain that you rise up early and go late to rest. You remember Ecclesiastes talk about vanity. And Solomon was one who was at that time the richest person who had ever lived, the wisest person who had ever lived, and he was also the king of Israel. He had lived a lot of life, and he had tried a lot of things. He had hit his head up against a lot of brick walls, and at the conclusion of all that, in Ecclesiastes, he says, everything is vanity. The only thing that matters is that you and I learn to what? Fear the Lord and keep his commandments. And so Solomon is here, and he's talking about the need to trust the Lord when he says, unless the Lord builds the house, those who do it in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. This idea of the Lord, you can see it there on the screen. The Lord is capitalized. Anytime you see that in the Old Testament where all the letters of Lord are all caps, it is trying to connect us to the Hebrew word for God, that is Yahweh. It is the word they used for God when they wanted to remind the listeners about certain things about God. This was the name for God when they wanted to remember that we have a God who's different from the other gods, that he's a covenant-keeping God, that he is a promise-keeping God. And so when Solomon says, unless the Lord builds the house, what he is saying is, unless the Lord, the one who keeps his promises, the one who remembers his covenant, the one who does what he says, unless he is involved in the process, it does not matter what you do. You are not going to be able to succeed apart from him. And see, this is what I was struggling to try to learn. I thought if I put a plan in place and did everything I was supposed to do and get the job with the right insurance and the right this and the right that, make all the right moves, that I could dictate life. That I could play chess and move pieces around on the board for my benefit and the benefit of my family. And guys, that's just simply not how life works. It doesn't allow us to put everything in the neat little box that we want it in. And training children and bringing them up in the fear and admonition of the Lord, dealing with the different personalities, being able to navigate different experiences, deal with heartache and pain and all of those things that life brings, not just to them, but even to us as adults, requires divine help. Even this idea of building the house, some commentators attribute that to not the actual work of building a house like a carpenter would, but the work of building a family. And they say this is the link between verses 1 and 2 and verses 3 through 5, and why you can take all of this as instruction on how we are to go about bringing up the next generation. You know, there are a few verses and a few moments in history where the Old Testament talks about family building. In Genesis chapter 16, verse number 2, Sarah, who we would know becomes Sarah, is talking about her desire to have children and not being able to do that. And she comes up with the idea of Abraham, why don't you just use my servant and, have a baby with her, and I'll build my family that way. In Genesis chapter 30, verse 3, a similar situation. Jacob is married to Rachel, and he says, she says to him, she's looking out the fact that she doesn't have children, and she says, well, Jacob, have some kids with my servant, and I'll build a family that way. And then in Exodus chapter 1, verse 21, you find the midwives, and the midwives in the book of Exodus were charged with birthing all the Israelite children. These were Israelite women, and they were the midwives, they were the caretakers, they would help the Israelite mothers bring children into the world. And Pharaoh had given them an ultimatum or a mandate and said, any male children, you need to kill them and do not let them live. He was trying to control the Israelite population and keep them weak. So he says, all the male children you need to destroy. And they said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to trust the Lord even with our own lives, because we know that Pharaoh is powerful. He could kill us with the snap of his fingers. And they said, you know what? We're going to trust God. We're not going to do that. And so in Exodus 1:21, it says that the Lord, that these women were able to build families. The Lord gave them families because they refused to do what Pharaoh says. And so here you have three examples. You got Sarah, you got Rachel, you have these midwives. Two of them say, you know what? We can figure this out on our own. We can orchestrate this thing in such a way to help God out. We can manufacture the result we want because we're tired of waiting on God. So we're going to do it this way. We're going to help him out. Surely he don't understand what he's doing. He needs my divine wisdom to be able to orchestrate his plan. So I have a solution. And it never worked the way they thought it should work. And I don't know, we have seem like an uprising of thought that, because we see these great figures in the Old Testament who did great things for God and had multiple spouses, that today now we can have multiple spouses. That thought is taken off again in our culture, in our society. And the one thing nobody ever points out who believes that is that it never worked for those families. That those homes were full of jealousy and deceit. That those homes were full of destruction. That those kids grew up and did awful things. That they delegitimized people and they threw them out into the wilderness to die. And God had to come in and save people, all because they thought they could come up with a plan that works better than God. And the point I'm simply trying to make is that we must learn to trust him in this process. That our work is meaningless apart from him. That you and I cannot fathom enough right answers to be able to raise anybody's kid. To be able to mentor them, to pour into their lives is simply unsustainable. He goes on to say in this song, he says, it is unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. And this idea of watchman is dealing with the way that the Old Testament culture in Israel was set up. They would have these cities, and on the walls of these cities, watchmen would stand on guard. And the watchmen were waiting, and they were looking for enemies to approach the city, and then they would get down off the wall, and they would blow the horns or run through the city to alert everyone that danger was on the way. And so this idea speaks to security, it speaks to safety, it speaks to the lifts that people go through to make themselves safe. And what the psalmist is saying here, he says there's not a watchman in all of Israel good enough to look out for the enemies by himself. That God has to be the one doing the watching. That God has to be the one doing the protecting. You know, in today's culture, we've replaced watchmen with what? Good alarm systems on our home. Good alarm systems on our cars. Weapons that we can go and buy, and we can train ourselves to use them. The police department that we want to keep us safe. You know, our military, even if you pull up to a military base, even in today's culture, you'll find the guards at the gate. They're watching. They're paying attention to who's coming in and who's going out. You can't get in or out without the right credentials. But what the psalmist is saying here, he says that all your watching is in vain if the Lord is not also watching. Parents, listen to me. This is your opportunity to trust God with the well-being of your kids. To not live or create a bondage where you always have to they always have to be in your view. Because believe it or not, they do grow up. They learn to drive. They go to school, they go to work, they go places. You're not going to always be there. And we trick ourselves into thinking that somehow, some way, they're safe because our eyes are on them. And take it from someone who lost a newborn child and had to go pay for a casket. You can't see that good. You're not that strong. You're not that powerful for your child's safety to rest on you. I'm not saying being a bad parent. I'm not saying be neglectful by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not saying, see your kids playing with needles and just, I trust the Lord, and turn and go the other way. I'm not saying that. But if your safety and security of the young people in your lives that you love and trust rests on your ability to see, you're in trouble. Rest on your ability to be there, you're in trouble. We got some adults who can't go on a date or take a trip. Or guess what, guys? Take a break from your kids so that you can be a good parent, because they'll wear you out over time. The anxiety and the stress and the always having to be on guard, like that's not good for any of us. Sometimes you got to take a break, and you can't do that or feel free to do that if you feel like you have to always see them. The truth of the matter is, God is watching. And when the Lord is watching, he sees farther and better than all of us. And when they are in his care and his watchful eye, he can protect them ways that we simply can't. And so my encouragement to us today as we seek to trust the Lord with them, that we will recognize, we will understand the futility, the weakness that you and I inherently have. We just can't be everywhere at all times. But we serve a God who is able. He goes on to say in verse 2, it is vain to rise up early and to go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives to his beloved sleep. And when you think about this section of trusting God, this is speaking to our desire and our ability to get up and go and work hard because we want to provide. To burn the candle at both ends because we want to make sure everything is taken care of. And so what is Solomon saying? Is Solomon communicating to us this morning that working hard is a bad thing? No, that's not what he's saying. How do we know that? Because Solomon wrote Proverbs, and in Proverbs he talks about not being lazy and not being a sluggard and to watch the ant and to mimic the ant's movement. And when you look at an ant, I've never seen an ant take a nap. Just haven't seen it. They always on the move. They busy. They working. And Solomon's saying you need to do that. That we need to be people who are willing to work hard. And then there's another extreme where people, what does he say? He says that we need to be willing to work hard, but then he says, for he gives his beloved sleep. He gives his beloved sleep. And so he's talking about working hard and working hard. So what is his problem in this passage with work? I think it's found when he says, eating the bread of what kind of toil? Anxious toil. It's the work that has no peace. It's the anxiety of it because you feel like if you don't hit every benchmark that you have laid out for yourself, that somehow your kid's life gonna fall apart. If you can't provide every little thing that you always wanted to provide and you just got to work a little harder and you got to go do a little this and a little that and a little this, and the anxiety of it all will kill you. And the psalmist says this anxious laboring is not good because God gives sleep to his beloved. And I love how he says that. He don't just say children, he says beloved. Guys, we got to recognize God loves us too. That he cares for us too, that he is intimately involved in our lives, that he longs to take care of us. You and I are not alone, and we don't need to work like we are. That we are in and of ourselves. No, we have a provider in heaven that is working while we rest. That is orchestrating things in such a way that the people we love and care about, he can see about them. He is the one who never sleeps and slumbers. Our batteries run low. And I watch us, energy drink after energy drink, coffee after coffee, working. You know what I tell myself? Man, if I can't stay awake on my own, that means I might need to go to sleep. And if I need to put something in my body that's going to force me to be awake, it might not be good for me. So I don't do it. I don't want to be addicted to energy drinks. I don't want to be addicted to coffee. No, I want to go to take a nap. Because I recognize my limitations. That in and of myself, I can't take care of nobody. I can't accomplish anything. I need the Lord on my side. How does Jesus say this in the New Testament? He says, apart from me, in John 15, you can't do anything. Well, guys, we got to learn not to try it. Now, the other extreme to this is, I was talking to a young person the other day, a 19, 20-year-old. They got a big bill coming up. I mean, a big bill. And I've been talking to him for a little while now, like, hey, this bill is coming up. You have to be vigilant about getting a job and working and making sure you're able to meet the requirement that's before you, because I don't want to see disappointment on your face when it comes and you're not able to do that thing you've been wanting to do because the bill can't be met. And I reached out to him the other day because unknown to them, somebody had been working behind the scenes and working out a huge chunk of this bill, right? So I called him and I said, hey, God has provided. Somebody wants to help with a portion of this bill. And you know what they said to me? They said, this is without a job. So they're not listening to the advice I've been giving them, like get this job, get to work. They said, man, I've been praying that the Lord will provide. And without thinking, I was like, he already did. He gave you 2 arms and 2 legs. Go get a job, right? But the point is that while they do need to do that, while they need to be diligent, while we need to be diligent, the Lord is working and multiplying things in ways that we just can't simply understand. God, I don't care what your plan is. I don't care how many years you done look down the road. I don't care how much strategic planning you do, which we need to do. It will not work apart from God. I don't care what goals you have for your nieces, your nephews, your children, people that you're mentoring. The stuff won't work apart from God's help. So we must learn to trust Him. We must learn to trust Him in this process. I don't know about you guys, but, parenting is hard. Like, it get rough. You come to some crossroads quite often. Pouring into other people's lives, it can be frustrating. You get discouraged because you see the roadblocks that they're about to hit. And you want so desperately to keep them from making those mistakes. And no matter how much you talk and talk, sometimes they just can't hear you. And that's why I'm glad that it doesn't all depend on us. That God is at work in this process. The next thing I want us to see is the idea that we need to enjoy the blessing from the Lord. Enjoy the blessing from the Lord. Look at verse number 3. He says, "Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward." The psalmist opens up here, he says, behold, he's making an announcement. He's trying to make sure that they are about to hear what he's saying. He wants them to trust God. He wants them to not run and try to build, to watch, to toil to the point of anxiety. He says, I don't want you to do that. But behold, take note to what I'm about to say. Children are a blessing. Guys, that's true when they don't feel like a blessing. He says, children are a blessing from the Lord. That it is a gift from Him. So look at God in this passage. He is the one who is building. He is the one who is watching. He gives rest, and He also gives the next generation. Like they are from Him. And guys, this is something that we need to remember when we are attempting to pour into them, that they come from God. That it is not good for us to be motivated and full of complaint and oh my God, and worry and stress and anxiety and point that at them and say, you're the problem. No, they're a gift. In all their heartache, in all your struggle, in all your toil in their lives. And guess what, guys? The reward of children is not connected to their performance. It's connected to their existence. The fact that they exist make them reward. Whether the difficulty you have with them right now is high or is very low, they're a gift. And I want to hit on this later, but let me just slide it in briefly. Don't play favorites with them. Don't allow your heart, even as much as it wants to lean into one more than the other because one is more compliant than the other. Because one washes the dishes when you say so, and one won't touch them for a month if you say so every day. They are a reward either way. Because what we fail to remember as adults is sometimes the reward is God working on us as we try to work with them. Some lessons you ain't gonna get any other way. You know, there's nothing that can put you on your knees quite like being responsible for another human being. There's nothing that can put you on your knees quite like when the one you have poured into gives you wrath and venom back. There's nothing that can quite put you on your knees like a wayward child, a child who cares nothing about God, nothing about what you're saying. They are your gift to drive you to the one who can help. They don't have to get it all right. Just like you and I didn't get it all right. And a lot of times the one we struggle with the most are the ones that are just like us. And don't forget, you may have played a role in them being here in the first place. Or it could be your fault. But the next time we want to complain to the point of exhaustion, I just want us to remember, man, they came from God himself. You know, you seen those old cartoons. I used to look at them cartoons and say, psh, man, this is so unbiblical. We know no babies ain't come with no bird flying down on the, wrapped up in the little thing. Like, that ain't true. That ain't how kids get here. But what is true about it is that they are a gift from somewhere else. And it ain't just from body parts. That God is in this equation. That he has delivered them to us from heaven. That he desires for them to be in our households or to be in our sphere of influence for their benefit and our benefit. In the good and the bad. You know, in this day and age we living in, we unfortunately are seeing a lot of young people's lives cut short. And sometimes when I talk to my friends who are dealing with the wayward adult kids, you think toddlers is rough. Man, it ain't rough like jokers walking out your door, don't care nothing about what you say, and you can't make them stay. That's a different kind of rough. But what I remind my friends with them adult kids that are doing their own thing in the moment, I remind them, man, it's a gift to be talking to them while they breathing instead of visiting a tombstone. It's a lot of parents out here got to visit that tombstone. They would give body parts to have another argument with that child. They would give body parts to have that child disobey them again, to dismiss them again. And so even if it's rough and you don't like them very much, do not forget the gift that it is to have them in the first place. And give yourself room enough to fathom the devastation of them not being there. And allow that place in your heart to help hold your words when you talk to them. To help hold your heart when you try to instruct them. When you need to be praying for them. Because if we are honest, we would much rather be dealing with rebellious kids than no kid at all. And we can line up parents from here to Atlanta who would tell us, cherish them every day. Love on them every day. Recognize that the pain and the struggle that you in right now is a gift from the Lord. You see, the New Testament tells us the commands of God are not burdensome. You know, being a good parent is not a burden. And it's not a burden because God will be with you and give you what you need if we're trusting him. Now, if we think it all depends on us, if we think we somehow have the power to say the right things and make the right moves, and they're gonna do exactly what we say, if you think you can do that, then I will be frustrated too. But if we know we can't, and we know we need help, and we know that we need divine intervention, then we can hang on a little while. And you know, this goes just not only for kids that are in our home, but any child or any young person that we have an opportunity to be around. You know, when I come up here to the summer camp and I see these kids running around here, laughing, some of them ready to fight, some of them not listening, all of the above, it's a blessing, man. Because the minds are still so impressionable, and they won't forget some of the seeds that are planted. And they won't forget the way they felt being in a safe environment where adults are loving on them and trying to appreciate them and dealing with all they have to deal with and still talking to them in a way that gives them dignity and respect. You know, the last thing I want to point out to us as we think about this is realize that when you're investing in the next generation, that it's a long-term investment. Oh man, ain't no quick fix to this. Look at verses 4 and 5. It says, like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gates. This speaks to the future reality of what God is doing in these kids' lives, that they don't stay small. It says, like arrows in the hands of a warrior are the children of one's youth. The ability to shoot them out and launch them out into the world to be productive. You know, an arrow is not something that you throw away. An arrow is something that is designed and has a unique purpose and can be launched great distances, can be used for protection, can be used for hunting, can be used for these type of realities. And it says that these kids are going to grow up one day and they're going to be sent out and they're going to be placed strategically around the world, hopefully to advance God's kingdom and hopefully to be a light and a blessing on society. And look at what it says in verse 5. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gate. You know, this didn't make sense to me for a long time. But I'm in a different season of life now. And when you think about this idea of not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gate, in the old culture, the gate of the city a lot of times were where people gathered to handle their different type of disputes. And they would be there and people could make accusations against you and you would have to defend yourself. You would have to come up with an answer to whatever the complaint was. You could go there and you could say what your complaint was, and hopefully you would be able to navigate the situation in a way that would bring about justice in your life. That you would find mercy. You would find the right solutions. You would do that at the gate. But if you were there and the enemies were more craftier than you, if they had more influence and powerful than you, you could go to those gates and find yourself in a place where you will be taken advantage of, that you will be mistreated, that you will be shamed, as the passage says, because of a miscarriage of justice. And oftentimes widows and orphans, they would go to these gates and there would be no one to fight for them. But this speaks to a day when the younger generation could stand up and go to the gate with their father and make sure he wasn't mistreated. And this is a beautiful thing because God has designed life in such a way that the longer we live, the less independent we're going to become. And somebody going to have to look out for you. Life is a strange cycle because right now you may be changing them stinking diapers. One day somebody going to have to change your diaper. Right now, you got to get up and you got to go fight for justice on behalf of your kids. One day, somebody going to have to fight for you. Right now, you got to make sure that they're treated with dignity and respect and they're loved and they're not taken advantage of. One day, somebody going to have to do that for us. And guess what? If you're pouring into the next generation, it's probably going to be somebody in your house. So while you're going toe-to-toe with these kids, make sure, don't forget, they're going to have to wipe your butt one day or leave you in that diaper for hours because of how you treated them when they were small. God forbid. But one day we're going to need to do that. And guess what I'm trying to say, a long-term investment. God, you really ain't going to know the measure of your work until they're somewhere in their 40s and 50s. You ain't gonna know. You can't tell now at 17, 10. You sure can't tell at 3. You can't tell at 25, 30 a lot of times. You don't know what life what ultimately they're gonna become. And my mom probably don't want me telling her business, but it was a beautiful thing to watch. That's all I'm saying. Y'all know my dad passed. My mom is here. Well, she still, she on that side of the spectrum where she gonna do it just as long as she can by herself. She gonna fight tooth and nail for her independence, and I ain't mad at it, right? But she fell out the door and broke her ankle because she was trying to go cut some grass. All right. That's just what she on at 75 years old. Y'all all right? Put me and her on your prayer list. All right. But she fell. And, I stopped what I was doing. I took her to the emergency room. I sat with her. We did the x-rays. We did all of that. And then she just had to, and then my sister came down. And my sister came down and she got my mom and took my mom back to her house. She stopped working. She came down. She stayed with my mom in her house for a couple of days and then took her back, because my mom's a woman, my sister's a woman. It made good sense for her to go there so she can watch out for her. And then she had to come back for an appointment. And my brother brought her back to the appointment. And me and him sat in there. We talked to the nurses, the doctors, whatever. And I say this to say, I can guarantee if my mom would have thought about it when we was teenagers, she wouldn't have been able to count on not one of us to be there for her at 75. I mean, it wasn't looking promising in any direction. Sometimes I laugh and joke with my kids. I tell them, I say, man, y'all jokers gonna stick me in the nursing home somewhere and never come visit me when I get home. I'll pick one and I'll say, now you might come and see me. But this one over here, boy, if I got to depend on you, I'm in trouble, right? And I just play around with them like that. But I want to plant the seed in their mind One day I'm going to be old. And I'm going to need somebody to make sure that in front of my enemies and the people trying to take advantage of a senior citizen, that somebody looking out for me. And that's the goal that we work towards when we're training up these kids, is that when they're in their 40s and their 50s, they can come back and be a help by the way we treated them, the things we implanted in them, that they might not catch it till they're 40-something. You know, I'm not sure. I think my mom at 75 is just now realizing she did all right as a parent. It could have been a lot worse. But she just now coming to that realization as she's watching the kids that gave her a hard time step up and do things to make life a little bit easier. And man, you never know who you pouring into. You never know. Give them time. Realize that the investment is not short term. You know, we in the microwave generation, right? We want it to happen, and we want it to happen now. You know, that's why a lot of us don't invest in the stock market. We want to be rich yesterday, right? Everything got to happen right now. But the truth of the matter is, and I think Fred told me this, if you want shade, at some point you got to plant some seeds. And you got to give them trees time enough to grow. And the young people in our lives, when we have them, they seeds. They the little bitty plants. They're not, we expect them to be trees. It's not their time. You know, and there's a coach, I'll try to say his name. I think his name is Demont, I think was his name. But anyway, in 1991, this part of the story ain't great, but I'm going to tell you anyway, because it's his story. He was coaching a small college, and I think the team was all black or majority black. He was a white guy. And he asked them if he could put the N-word in his speech, like his pregame speech, all right? All the kids said, yes, you can put it in your speech. He did it, got fired. He sued the school. All 11 of the black players joined him in his lawsuit, trying to help him keep his job because they didn't believe for a second that this coach that they had seen every day was at all racist. He still got fired. Nobody would hire him. There wasn't a college, a high school, anywhere that wanted this man anywhere around their kids in 1991. So he decided, he lost that job, he moved back to his hometown, and he started being a financial planner, started helping people with their finances. But he had this itch to coach. And he went to a little community center at a Jewish community center, and he asked him if he could open up the gym on Sunday nights and just do some basketball training for kids. Well, first time he opened up, about 3 or 4 kids came. Before he knew it, 100 kids was coming and getting this training. And then one day he met a young man, I believe his name was Drew. And Drew came in, short little guy, but he was determined to be a good basketball player. And then Drew said, hey, this is so good, I'm going to bring my 13-year-old buddy. His 13-year-old was a little skinny, he was skinny, but he was 5'10" at the time. And so him and his little Drew and his friend, they came in and they started doing these drills, and his friend name was LeBron, and they just doing these little drills. And this thing grew so much to Drew and LeBron, they decide, okay, now it's time for us to go to high school. And they're getting ready to go to high school, and this coach, who had lost his job, and now just working with these kids and pouring back into them, He gets a job at a different high school. Well, they weren't going to go to that school because Drew's dad was an assistant coach at this big old school, this powerhouse school. And little Drew showed up because he wanted to be on the varsity team, and the coach was like, man, you ain't big enough to be on my varsity team. You know, I ain't going to do that. But that little coach that had been working them out, he said, hey, Drew, you can come to my team. Wasn't long after that, LeBron went to his team too. And by the time they got to the 9th and 10th grade, they was winning back-to-back championships. And then this coach got another college coaching opportunity, so he left, and he got a college opportunity. And last year, 2023, he took a small college to March Madness for the first time in the school's history. And then he just retired. And guess who's still coaching with him? Lil Drew is his lead assistant. And he's hoping that Lil Drew going to be able to take over that school and that they're going to hire him because I think Lil Drew is 39 at the time right now. He's 39 last year. All right, so he's 40 this year. And obviously, the other guy is LeBron James. And he quit his job because his wife got cancer, and she's battling cancer. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. Do you think, and LeBron just had his old high school coach on his podcast, and he says, this man is responsible for teaching me what hard work on the basketball court looked like. And he is responsible for teaching me what preparation looked like. Do you think there is anything that man gonna need for his wife as she battles cancer that LeBron James is not gonna provide for him? Do you think that for the rest of his life, if he need to hold a little something, that LeBron James is not gonna give it to him? But he met him as a 13-year-old kid with no dad in his life in a gym after he had made a mistake and nobody wanted him around. And the point of what I'm trying to say is, do not underestimate the investment long-term in the young people in your house and the young people around you who may not have the same things your household have. You could be investing in the next LeBron James, or the next doctor, or the next lawyer, or just the next decent human being who God is going to use to have a positive impact in the world. Amen.